Hello, and welcome to the Masters in Telecommunications program at the University of Maryland at College Park.
Hello, my name is Michael Lomo. I'm the Associate Director and Advisor for the Masters in Telecommunications program at the University of Maryland, College Park. And this is the second of my advising talks that I'm giving for the web. The first talk dealt with the most common question that I get from new master's students in telecommunications, namely, what courses should I take? This second talk is going to be about the second most popular question, namely, how do I get my resume to look good? How do I get my resume to attract attention and hopefully get me an interview and get me a job? So first of all, let's talk a little bit about your resume in general. And for in particular masters in telecom students that, I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. Number one, the first thing to realize is that your resume is essentially your professional calling card. This is what you're going to give people to tell them who you are and where you fit in the general scheme of telecommunications professionals. All right. If you're a new master's student in telecommunications, you need an updated resume. You want to attract good attention. I say good because it's easy to attract attention, but you don't want to be that guy or that girl. You want good attention. You want them to say, this is someone that I want to think about hiring. And hopefully, I'll interview them. First things first, somewhere along the line, you got to mention that you're in the master's program and give an expected date of graduation. Why? Well, it's important for employers to know that you are not stagnant. I'm not just somebody who wants to do telecom who has a bachelor's degree. I'm in a master's program. I'm learning more. Employers like it when they see employees who are interested in growing. What does it mean for them? It means that I can hire this person now, and maybe a year or 2 years down the road, they will be capable of doing more for me. Basically, from my point of view, it's free employee development. These people are, and even if it isn't free, I may be willing to pay for courses toward this person's degree, if I think I'm going to get something good out of it at the end from the employee. And this is a two-way street. I mean, the company wants to get something good out of you. You're getting something out of them. So it usually works out for both parties. One of the problems that I run into often, since we have a large number of international students in the program, is that international students often have resumes tailored to their particular home countries. Now, there's nothing really wrong with this. I mean, you've been working in wherever you're from, and you have a resume that's suited to that. But the problem is that resumes like that sometimes don't seem quite right to, a US reader. All right. And this talk is primarily aimed at getting a job in the US telecom market. And wherever you're applying, if you're applying to other countries, you should seek out resumes, what the popular style of resume is in that where you're applying. In the US, there are some things you just don't really want to do. It's weird, and you don't want that kind of attention. I mean, if you want to be different, you want to be different in a good way. I want to hire, I look at this person's resume and, they're interested in wireless, but they've also taken courses in machine learning. That's different in a good way. It means they've got some more depth and breadth to them. Maybe there's something I can do with that going down the line with an employee. Maybe that means they'll have different ideas than, the rest of the people on my staff. And that's one of the things that's also important to an employer, is to have students that, as one of my colleagues says, that aren't clones, that they're going to be able to have different ideas that would hopefully be good ideas and would help make a profit for my company. But when you appear odd because you're very different, that can be off-putting. And we want to avoid that. Your resume is your first impression. You want to look like someone that I know that I can put into my lab and is going to work well with the rest of my employees. And don't think you're done as soon as you finish your resume. You're not. Updating a resume is going to be an ongoing process for a master's student. Why? Well, think about it. Initially, you're a new master's student. You're going to be producing a resume primarily geared, as you think about it, toward getting a summer internship or an internship in the spring or a co-op position or something like that. All right. That's great. Now, a year from now, you're going to be looking for a full-time job or preparing to look for a full-time job. You're going to need to update the resume with the latest that courses you've taken and the latest stuff on you, but also, update the GPA, update the graduation status. Once you graduate, you want the date of the degree recorded. All that kind of good stuff has to be updated. And don't think it stops there either. After that, you may be employed at a company, and for internal review purposes, you have to update your resume every year or every 6 months or something. And of course, after a couple of years, you may want to move to a different company or a different position, even within the company or at another company. You want a promotion. Again, you're going to need to update your resume. So this is going to be an ongoing process, and your resume will develop over years. All right. So let me say a couple of words about where I'm coming from with this. First of all, I'm focusing on, new masters in telecommunications students, or, well, any masters in telecommunications students, pursuing a telecom-related degree. If you're in other engineering fields, most of what I'm saying is probably going to be applicable. If you're in far afield from that, if you're in the arts or sciences or humanities or something, less and less may be appropriate. Your mileage may vary, all right, depending on what you're kind of trying to do and what your objective is. Another thing to realize is different people like to see different things. I am going to be telling you about what I think is good in a resume, all right, based on my time when I was a director of engineering services at a small telecommunications company. And I used to interview several people, and we have to bring in resumes, and I read through these things. That plus my time looking at, resumes from incoming graduate students to our program. All right. I am clearly not the world's expert here. So I'm going to keep it simple and keep it to basics, stuff that mostly most people should agree with. But if you really want an excellent view on creating a good resume, I strongly advise you to visit the Career Center at your graduate school. At Maryland, if your school has one, like Maryland has an engineering career center. That's fantastic. They are particularly geared toward people like you looking for jobs like the one you want. These are very good organizations to focus your resume the right way. Doing this at the start of your program is important because you want to be ready for the internship season as it comes down the road in a few months. And remember, career centers have seen a lot more resumes than I have. All right, granted, I've seen quite a few, but they've seen more, and they have more experience with determining what is successful and what is less successful. There are many templates available on the web, or actually, even if you have, a copy of Microsoft Word, they've got templates built in to build resumes. If you're going to use these kinds of templates, you have to be careful, though. Some templates are not appropriate for telecom engineering in particular. All right. You see anything with a picture on it, that's usually geared at something where your looks are important. For example, a modeling position or a television announcer type of position, people have a little photograph of themselves. Technical resumes for technical jobs typically don't. All right. There's a lot of templates also for high school students looking for summer jobs. Again, your resume is going to be more of a professional object, and it's going to need to carry an air of professionalism with it. And remember, there's more than one way to write a good resume. I'm giving you what I consider to be appropriate. Again, your mileage may vary. All right, so let's talk about some basic principles. First, personal information is usually the first thing on your resume. Your name, if nothing else. And typically, you want to have a short little section of personal information that goes with your name. Your name, your address, contact information, a professional email, and a phone number. When I say professional email, I don't mean that you have to have a fully, work for a company or something. What I mean is it should be an email address that that fits your role or as a professional. It might have been fun in high school to have an email address, I love kittens at gmail.com. That's not going to fly too well in professional circles. Similarly, it's typically good if your email address carries some weight with it. Gmail.com is okay. International addresses, especially some of them that are known to be viewed by other by countries and such. Typically, you want to avoid that. If you're in a master's in telecom program or any master's program or graduate school, you'll typically have a school address. That's a good professional address. Saying that I am mdelomo at umd.edu. All right, that tells me, I'm at this high-class organization. I'm doing smart stuff, and that's good. That's appropriate professional behavior. You shouldn't include pictures. We already talked about that. Age, gender information tends to make American employers a little bit, well, all right, age and gender tend to be hot buttons in society in general. There are a number of cases of age discrimination and gender discrimination that some companies have wrestled with in the past, and some of them are unfortunately still wrestling with. But that non-professional activities, the best case scenario is you're going to bring up a sore subject. So better not to mention it at all. Let them figure it out, if they need to figure it out. And for things like age and gender, they're not supposed to need to figure it out. Non-professional information, some personal information that can be included at the end of the resume if there's space and time as you're building the resume. And we'll talk about that when we get there. Next basic principle for a resume: white space is very important. All right. A lot of times students are so anxious to put everything they ever did on the resume, they forget this fact. When you're reading resumes, I'm going to tell you from experience, dense resumes are hard to read. They're also easy to put aside, Look at these two resumes. You don't even have to be able to actually see any of the writing. Just look at them from a 50-yard stare. And what do you say? Which one do you want to read? I look at the one on the left and I'm thinking to myself, probably using about 9-point font. All this information is packed there. I'll look at that one later. By the way, later may never come. I may have filled the job by the time later comes. That resume is as good as rejected. I haven't consciously rejected. It's just not the first one I want to look with. All right. The second resume, I can even tell from this distance. The person's called out sections. There's some white space. There's some bulleted lists in there. This is going to be a much easier resume to read. Now, you don't want a lot, you don't want 80% of your resume to be white space. What'd you do? You have nothing on there. No, but you got to find a good balance. A good balance where there's enough information, enough bullet points to let me know what you can do without, telling me everything you ever did in your entire academic career. And I mentioned font size before. Fonts should always be legible. Personally, I think 10-point is good. I think, 12-point is good. 10-point or less is typically bad. I'm on the fence about 11. I kind of like it. But like I said, I'm on the fence about it. That might be a question for your career center. Again, if I have to squint to read your resume, I'm going to put it aside, probably forever. I'm not going to ever get to it. And one last thing, all those cute fonts that Word or whatever word processor you're using has, don't. Can you imagine what it would be like reading several pages or, a full page of something written in a font like this? It's going to give me a headache. You don't want your reviewer to be thinking that when they look at your resume. All right, so let's look at some more basic principles. All right. In my opinion, all right, and opinions vary. My opinion, one page should be enough for a new master's student. You're going to tell me about your education. You're going to tell me about, possibly any skills that you've learned during your graduate study. You're going to tell me about your internships, maybe if you had one or two jobs. That'll nicely fill a page. You'll have a little room at the bottom for a little more stuff. All right. Some people disagree with me. They think a master's student should be able to fill a page and a half. From my point of view, anything more than a page, you're probably wasting my time reading this stuff. You're telling me stuff that, while it might be nice, is not going to influence my decision a lot. And keep in mind, my resume is 2 pages. I have over 40 years of experience. When 40 years of experience you have, 2 pages you can use. Okay. Important sections in order. Number 1, personal contact information. Very short section at the beginning, name, your address, email. I forgot to mention things like a LinkedIn profile if you have one, or usually for engineers you wouldn't have Instagram profiles or any other social media contacts. But if you have professional social media, like for example LinkedIn, a lot of people like to put that on there. Of course, if you're an artist, maybe you do want to have some social media. Anyway, but a short personal contact information at the start, and then your education. You're a master's student. That should come up front. All right. This again is going to be fairly short. Typically, master's degree, when you expect it, et cetera, et cetera. We'll talk more about that in a second. That may be undergraduate information, a line about your thesis, maybe a short section after that on skills or courses. But again, fairly short. Then experience. From my point of view, this is the heart of the resume. All right, your experience is telling me what I want to know as an employer. If your experience is kind of weak or non-existent, if you're a new master's student, you might have just gotten out of undergraduate, haven't had any jobs, then you're going to have to do something else to make up for that. And we'll talk about that. And after that comes some optional sections. And after the optional sections, filler. All right. Stuff you're going to put on there so you have a nice looking page. All right. One final word one more thing I want to say about this. All right. Those are your 3 big sections plus the optional stuff and filler. It's important to make sure that you maintain strict ethical standards. Remember, if you put something on your resume and you say, I'm a Python expert, that's nice if you're a Python expert. If you're not, and you say you're a Python expert, That may be the first question I ask you in an interview. Given this list structure, how do I create a dictionary out of it? And I'll expect you to be able to code it on the fly because, hey, you're a Python expert. So be careful about what you say. A lot of times students tend to exaggerate overly because they want to make their resumes look great. I'm a telecom student, I'm in wireless, and my professor gave me a demo on, they brought in a scanner device and scanned the frequencies and, don't go, yes, you want to say you've seen a scanner and you've watched one work, that's fine. You want to say on your resume that you're an expert at scanning cellular signals using a scanner. That's not true. And you could get called on the carpet for that. And believe me, as soon as things like that happen in an interview, the interview will probably continue. I mean, most companies have guidelines on how the interviewer has to behave, but you've already lost the position. And one more final thing on this subject. No one ever said you had to only have one resume. You could have multiple resumes. And in fact, it's a very good idea if you do. Different resumes will be applicable to different jobs. All right, so let's talk about the major sections here. All right, we've already talked about personal contact information. Next, I want to talk about education and experience. Education should typically be the first real section after your personal information. Where'd you graduate from? Your degree, your major, your undergraduate GPA, if it's good. If it's not, leave it out, unless your employer absolutely insists. You're in a graduate program, what's your GPA? When are you expecting to graduate? Are you doing a thesis? What's the title? Are you doing a scholarly paper? What's the title? Different programs, depending on whether they're thesis-based, will usually, if it's a master's of science, it'll have a writing requirement of some kind. And you should mention the title. It's a talking point when you get called in for an interview. Oh, I see you wrote a paper on 5G, and then you launch into talking about it. Some people even carry around copies. Here's a copy of my paper I wrote, depending on how good it was. Next comes experience. And from an employer's point of view, this is the good stuff. This is what every employer is looking for. All right. Yeah, all the other stuff is nice, but I want to know who you've worked for and what you did. All right. Start with your most recent experience, work backwards. Internships count. Whether they're paid or unpaid, they count. Paid, of course, is better. If you were paid to do something at this stage as a first year master's student, if you were paid to do something, it's probably worth mentioning and including in the resume. Later on, you're going to want to drop the unpaid internships, and you'll even want to drop the paid internships once you've got a fairly good record of 5 or 6 years or so of employment, and if you've done several things. But at this stage, it's really important to show that you were paid to do something. Why is that? Well, when you hire someone who's never worked before, that's a scary thing. You're hiring someone, you don't know what they're going to do. You're hiring them based on a piece of paper you read and, a half an hour conversation you had during an interview. For all you know, the person may show up to work in a tutu, or, they may have all sorts of other weird personal problems or habits that makes it impossible for them to work with a group of people. You want to ease that fear. You want to make me sit here and say, well, I don't know everything about this person, but I know that, Western Wireless had them on the payroll for 6 months as an intern. They got paid. They showed up for work. They did a job. Good luck. Good. That gives me some confidence that at least you're going to be able to meet, bare minimum requirements of showing up for work and putting in 8 hours. And then come the optional sections. We talked about the big ones. All right. Now, optional sections. Skills, all right? Skills are a place where you can tailor your resume to the kind of job you're looking for. For example, if you're looking for a computing job, you may want to have programming languages on there. Or, you know, a networking job and you've used YSpy, you want to mention it. You know, so skills can be tailored, you know, and I'll only put the skills that meet that, or I'll focus on the skills that match the job that I'm looking for. Certifications, honors, fellowships, that's always a good thing to list. All right. Short list. All right. I don't want to see a half page of this. 1 or 2 bullets because, you know, I was a Fulbright scholar. I have, you know, I have a CCNA or a Juniper certification. These kinds of things are important. I was on a fellowship. All right. I received the Distinguished Student Award, you know, recipient, Distinguished Student Award, X, you know, a bullet or 2. Courses taken. This is another opportunity to tailor your resume. You might list different courses depending on the position. You know, like I said, computing languages, you know, computing course, you might want to list your data mining and machine learning classes. For a wireless position, you might want to list your 4G class and your, you know, OFDM class or whatever. Networking, you know, I took SDN. You want to mention this kind of stuff. Again, these should be short sections, couple of bullets total. Publications and patents. If you have a refereed publication as a master's student, it's worth mentioning. All right, it's published in the refereed journal, it's worth mentioning. If you have a patent, it's certainly worth mentioning. That will garner, patents will generally at the level of a master's student will generate a lot of interest. A lot of people like to have an objective or a summary statement where they tell you, you know, I seek a position where I can, you know, revolutionize the world with my wireless knowledge or something. I'm never a fan of these things, but some other people are. There's a whole debate on the web of whether you should have an objective or a summary, and you know that's fine. Some people like them. I usually would like to reserve that stuff for the cover letter. The resume is my chance to tell you what I can do. I'll let the employer decide what they want to do with that. You know, if he looks at my resume and he says I should be, you know, CTO, I don't want to have said, you know, I want an entry-level position. You know, let him read my resume and compare to the people that he's working with and figure out where I would fit in. You know, it might not be exactly where I think I fit in. It might be better, might be worse. Either way, that's something you can talk about during an interview, and your cover letter can expand on it. And we'll get to talking. I'll spend a few seconds on cover letters at the end of this talk. And then finally, filler. All right. To be honest, when I was in the position of reading resumes, I generally stopped after experience. Yeah, I'd look at the skills and publications and certifications, that kind of stuff. But everything else, I was done. You know, I already knew everything I needed to know to determine whether I wanted to interview this person after I got to the end of experience and maybe skills, publications, that kind of thing. Everything else you're telling me borders on wasting my time. You know, especially if I work for a company as an HR person and I've got to read the whole resume. You know, I might be sitting there cursing you out because you wrote me 2 pages of crap. You know, could be. In my opinion, projects are the big filler. All right. Students love listing projects. They tell me everything they've ever did. They give me a whole paragraph description of every project they worked on in their undergraduate and graduate career. Goes on for a page and a half, 2 pages. I always hated reading these things because, you know, it was a group project. For all I know, you sat in the back of the room and slept. 3 of your group mates did it. I don't have any way of evaluating that. If it's a professional job, well, then I know they didn't fire you. So that's a good thing. You obviously did something. Projects are only needed if your work experience is limited, i.e., the only thing you've done is 1 internship. Okay, fine. you want to list a couple of projects telling me about stuff you've done. All right. Or if your experience is not in the telecom field or not in the field you want to be in, maybe you graduated as an undergraduate, spent a year as a programmer, or, you know, in a sales office or something. And now you want a technical job in wireless or networking, or maybe you spent, you know, or programming, you know, if you would in sales or something, or support, something like that. Then it's a good idea to list some projects so I know that you have technical capabilities to do the things that you're applying to do. And I'll say a little more about this in a few minutes. And finally, you know, if there's a couple of lines at the end of your resume, there's room for some personal information. No more than 1 or 2 bullets at the very end. What I'm thinking of is, for example, I had a student, former student, who was the graduate representative to student government for a year and a half. That's a great thing to mention. It shows leadership. Another student started the cricket club at Maryland. He managed to get the university to put up money so that they could go to some meets. Again, shows leadership. It's a good thing to mention. Do I care that you're a lover of cats? No, probably not a good thing to mention. You get the idea. And again, 1, maybe 2 bullets at the end. Priorities are what should be important to put on here. After the personal contact information, education, experience, you want to prioritize what else to include. Certainly, publication and patents are going to go in there. Certifications, honors are going to be top priorities. These are things you want to definitely show if you've got them. Skills, courses, those are things that are also pretty good to put in. Short section of the skills. I don't want to know every single programming language that you covered in your survey of programming languages courses. You know, just a few major things, you know, major skills that you have, tools appropriate to your trade. For example, if you're in wireless, you want to mention that you got IBWave certified. I want to know about that. You're in networking. You know, I want to know about networking certifications. Like I say, if you're applying for computing position, programming language is going to be important. If you have limited work experience, projects will be useful. But number 1, keep it brief. Don't tell me about every aspect of the project. 1 or 2 bullets per project, please. You know, and not in 8-point font, in a real font. You know, keep it brief and keep it short. Don't list every project you did since 8th grade. I don't really need to know all that, and you're going to be wasting my time, and I'm going to get irritated. And before I said multiple resumes. So how does that work? Well, as a telecom student, hopefully you know something of wireless, of networking, of computing, and of business. So making a different resume for each different kind of job would make sense. Your wireless resume might mention wireless courses, propagation tools you use. I'm IBWave certified. I'm STK certified. I'm Ranplan certified. I'm Planet certified. These are things that mean something in the industry, tools that people use. In networking, I've got a CCNA, I've got a CCIE, I've got a Juniper certification. I got tired of listing all the Juniper certifications. Networking courses I've taken, maybe a projects that I did, if I did a really interesting networking project I want to mention. Computing, you would list languages, platform, courses. Maybe you've taken something in machine learning, data mining, something like that. Business, you might focus on entrepreneurship classes or business courses. If you were Maryland has an entrepreneurship competition. You know, I came in 2nd place. Well, that's probably worth a mention somewhere on there. Regardless of your focus, you need to be prepared. Remember that companies have many different kinds of jobs. So you may send in a resume for something. The guy may look at it and say, you know, yeah, you're applying for this job, but I got this other thing, you know, and you mentioned this collection of skills here that might fit over there better. And, you know, I need people over there. Let's talk. This might excite me to the point that I bring you in for an interview, possibly for both positions. You know, things like that can happen. And finally, I want to say a couple of words about a cover letter, not really about your resume in particular, but cover letters are an important part of trying to get an interview. Most students like to write a general cover letter that tell people how great they are. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's not a bad thing. You know, I'm so-and-so, I'm in a master's program. You know, I do this, I do that. I've learned this, I've learned that. And it's great. But is that really what I, as an employer, want to read? It would be better if you wrote a specialized letter for the position that you're applying to. Tell me why you have the skills to do that particular job and why you can solve my problems, or at least you know how to attack my problems, or you have the right classes, skill set, experience to be able to contribute to the solution. All right. And then include the right resume with that. You know, you're applying for a wireless position. You've got a wireless oriented resume. You're telling me about how you know this propagation tool, and you've had experience with this, and you know you've already done research, so you know what kind of thing I'm looking for, and you're aiming your letter and you're aiming your resume at that. This requires a lot of extra work. You're going to need to research the company, the position. You're going to have to write a separate letter for each one of these, and that could be that could be several dozens, hundreds, or at least over 100 at any rate, letters. And you'll have to actually research the position and probably even the manager. You know, the guy's the director of engineering services. Well, you know, maybe I should talk about what I can do for that. The guy is a deployment manager at a telecom company. Should tell him about propagation tools that I've used, projects I've done with that. It'll get you a lot more attention. Like I said, it's a lot of work, but it will get you a lot more attention. And after all, that's the point. At the end of looking at your resume, you want the person's reaction to be, or cover letter and resume, you want the person's reaction to be, I want to bring this person in for an interview. If you've achieved that, it's a success. So, thank you for listening. This was the second talk on resumes. I'll give a third talk on interviews in the near future. I'll record one. And again, I am with the Masters in Telecommunications program at the University of Maryland. You can check us out at telecom.umd.edu. Or if you would like to inquire, you can inquire with the program office at telecomprogram@umd.edu. And thank you.
Here at the Masters in Telecommunications program, we strongly believe that the best student experience involves hands-on labs and projects to equip our graduates to excel in the workplace.
One of the things that attracts students to our program is that we are very industry focused. We keep a constant tab on the skills that hiring agents want, and we make sure that we offer courses and labs that provide these skills.